In this video, we're going to talk about how cash physical therapists can book more patients over the phone, even if they have excellent insurance, in just 3 simple steps. And the reason that we're talking about this today is because we've coached thousands of cash physical therapists all over the world. And one of the most common questions we get is how do we convince people with great insurance to want to work with us? And so the first call, the first interaction people have is one of the most challenging ones, but it's also where most practices say they're the most confident. And the reason that this is because usually when practices first start, it's all grown off of word of mouth, referrals, and workshops. And so when we're growing like that, all the people who are coming to us are already trusting. Someone told them about our services, they saw us in a workshop, and so there's already trust there. And so what we say during that first conversation doesn't matter so much because they already believe us. But once we start scaling, once we start adding on different marketing channels and we start reaching a more diverse audience, then we start to reach a more skeptical audience that requires a little bit more convincing to get them to want to schedule with you, because the belief that they have is that they paid for insurance, they should use their insurance. And so this first call is really, really important to help change their beliefs that the best thing that they could do for their long-term result to get the ultimate outcome is to go with your cash services to reach that long-term result. So one of the hardest things that most clinicians have when they're talking to people over the phone is to not start teaching, to not start sharing their expertise, to show that they're really good at what they do. Instead, what we actually need to be doing is coaching so that they can come to the conclusion that working with you is in their best interest. So most clinicians don't realize that the more complex the sale, the more the prospect needs to convince themselves to work with you rather than being told or convinced. You know what I mean? Like, cash physical therapy sales are definitely complex. We're trying to get people to stop using their insurance and pay out of pocket for services that they've been told their entire lives that they should be using their insurance for. So they're not going to listen to you until they actually buy. And so you don't want to teach, instead you want to coach. And it's very, very important that you understand what the difference is. When we're teaching, we're telling them the answer. When we're coaching, we're guiding them to the answer, and they're coming up with it themselves, making them more likely for them to trust you and to believe in you and take that next step. So rather than talking about how different you are, convincing them to pay cash and kind of defending why you're charging cash, we need to start with a sales workflow that allows the prospect to convince themselves that they need to work with you regardless of what the cost is, because they want that long-term result. Otherwise, they're going to end up having to see a chiropractor every week for years, or having to go back to physical therapy every 6 months because they never actually solved the root cause of their pain. So fundamentally, there are really just 4 things that should be coming out of your mouth when you're selling. And I know in the beginning I said 3, but there's actually 1 extra step, but it's only a 30-second step, so it really shouldn't take that long. And so I didn't want to initially include it in that 3 steps. And so the first one is teeing up the call. When cash physical therapy sales, it is very important that you control the flow of the conversation. If you don't do that right in the beginning and show this prospect that there is a process that you're going through, they're going to immediately start throwing out objections, asking if you take their insurance, and all these other things that you don't want to start doing, because then you're on your heels, you're in a defensive position, and it's going to be really hard to get that patient scheduled. And so right from the beginning, it's very important that we take control, we tee up the call and tell them what they can expect talking with you today. So when you talk to them, you'd say, okay, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Tell me what's going on. Like, why'd you call today? Okay, perfect. Well, it sounds like we can't help, but I'm not 100% sure. So what I want to do is just ask you a few questions about what's been going on, what it is you're trying to do, what you've tried in the past, and really help figure out if what we're doing over here can even help you in the first place. Does that sound good? Okay, perfect. And that should just be it. So don't waste a ton of time building rapport and talking about the weather or nonsense things in town, because ultimately your personal rapport is not what's going to get them to schedule with you. It's your professional rapport. And the way we build professional rapport is getting straight to the point, asking very good questions, and helping this person come to their own conclusion that working with you is the best thing for them. And so once you've teed up the call, the next thing that should really take up 80% of the call is asking questions. And so many of you are already asking questions, but you're just not asking enough of them. You're just asking the most basic questions that the last person that they talked to also asked them. And if we take our prospects through the exact same sales experience that they just went through somewhere else, and then they've no other conclusion when all else is missing, that the only thing that they can make a decision on is proximity, how close they are, and the convenience of it, and the price. And so if we're not giving them an experience that they haven't gotten anywhere else, they're not going to go with you, because most likely you're charging premium rates. They're going to go with the cheaper option because they have no reason to think that what you're going to give to them is any different than the last person. And so it's very important that we ask really good questions and lead them to make the right decision. And so we love question-based sales frameworks for more complicated sales, because asking questions is the only way to change someone's beliefs. Okay, and so we ask leading questions that lead them to the conclusion that they should work with you to solve their pain and to reach the goals that they have for themselves. And so we ask basic questions to start things off, to just collect the information that we need. So, how did this injury happen? How long ago did it happen? What have you tried to fix it so far? And then don't just go down these questions, dig into them. So when you ask them what they've tried so far and they say, okay, I've been to a chiropractor, I've been to a PT, ask them okay, why do you feel like those things didn't work? What didn't you like about those? And then take note on all those things so that you can leverage those when you eventually get to your pitch, on how, and position yourself against those things and help them understand why those previous programs didn't work out for them and how your program is going to be different. And so once you understand what they've tried, ask them okay, you can't do overhead lifts when you're doing your CrossFit sessions. How does that feel? How's that impacting you personally, I guess? And try to figure out what the real underlying emotion is for. Because in any sales situation, we need to first understand what happened. We need to touch their heart, and then we need to give them the key in order to overcome the challenges that they have. And if you do not touch their heart and they are not emotionally connected to the solution you're going to give to them, it's going to be much, much harder to actually get them to schedule. So one of my other favorite questions is, what would a successful outcome look like for you? And what would you like us to ultimately help you accomplish? And really just dig into what their goals are, and what do you think are the biggest challenges that are preventing you from getting to that goal? We want to try to uncover every obstacle and objection that they're going to have before we ever get to the pitch. And so that's why we ask all these questions, because we want to be able to uncover and overcome objections before we get to the pitch. Because if you wait until the very end and after your pitch to start addressing objections, it's really, really hard. We want to make sure that we're asking questions to overcome those things before the pitch happens. And if we ask the right questions in the right order and take time here, we can prevent those objections from ever actually coming up. And so once we have a good idea of all this stuff, the second thing that you need to be doing is doing restatements, which shows how well you've been paying attention and shows understanding of their given situation. This might go kind of like this. So this is what I'm hearing, Mr. Smith. This is the primary issue that you're trying to solve. This is what you've tried, and this is why you think it hasn't worked yet. Does that sound about right? And so we just want to reiterate all these things, because most clinics that they've called, all they've asked is okay, yeah, what's going on? How long has it been going on? Yeah, we can definitely help with that. When can you come in? And so it's a very short transaction. Whereas in cash sales, when we're charging premium rates, we need to spend a little bit more time on this, because we want to make sure that they are a good fit and we are a good fit for them. Because it hurts us and them to get them on the schedule when they have no intention of ever actually buying cash packages. And so we want to properly triage them to make sure the wrong people don't get on the schedule, because that's taking up a spot from someone else that might have bought in a package. And so we don't want to just accept everyone. We want to properly filter people out. And if they aren't a good fit, that's okay. Give them some advice and refer them elsewhere. That's perfectly fine. When you are able to push people away and refer them elsewhere, once you talk to someone who is a good fit, you have that much more conviction, and they're going to want to schedule with you even more, because they also will have that conviction. So don't be afraid to push some people away. Make sure that the people you're scheduling are really the right fit. And so notice so far, we've asked questions, we've done restatements. Notice that none of this stuff is talking about how we're different. It's not sharing what our process is, and we're not making statements of fact. Okay, we're not teaching here, we're coaching. And so we're asking simple questions to guide them to the right conclusion. And so one of my favorite online coaches out there, Taki Moore, said that everyone benefits from having beliefs shifted. Only 10% of people actually benefit from tactics and strategies. And so we're actually providing even more value by challenging their beliefs through questions on the call rather than teaching. Because then we're providing value to 100% of the calls rather than just 10%. And those 10% of people that might actually execute on those strategies, they're probably not the right fit anyway, because they're going to try to do it all on their own. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, okay, if I'm asking questions and just restating things that they're telling me, how do I actually get them to schedule and close the deal? And that's a great freaking question. And so the third step that you need to go through is sharing stories. And this is the most important piece, because a lot of people, once they collect the information, they want to start telling the patient what it is that they need, kind of showing off their expertise, not realizing that people don't do what they're told to do. They do the things that they think that they should do. And so if we just tell them, they're not going to listen. To give you an example, when I was a little kid, whenever I'd go visit my grandparents' house, my parents would always tell me, don't you dare go in the basement, because there's a lot of sharp tools down there. My grandpa was a woodworker, and they didn't want me to get hurt. But because they just told me not to go down there, I made it a game to try to run down into the basement. They'd always have to stop and grab me. Until one day, my grandpa sat me down, and he said, you know what, Jordan, like, I know they've been telling you not to go in the basement. You think it's funny to go down there, but the real reason that we don't want you to go down there is because there's an alligator down there and he eats little kids. His name's Charlie. And this terrified me and my brothers. It became like a legend in my family. Like, is there really an alligator in the basement? And because of the story, I came up to my own conclusion that I shouldn't go down there because I don't want to be eaten. Okay, and so we need to do the same thing in our sales. Instead of telling people what they need, we need to tell them a story that helps them come up to their own conclusion that doing that thing is in their own best interest. And so stories are the most powerful tool that you can leverage to change beliefs and get someone to see that you're the best chance of getting the result that they're ultimately looking for. So by telling these stories, it does a really good job of teeing up the rest of the pitch, because it gets them to buy in, gets them to believe, and then you go right into getting them scheduled. So this usually goes something like this. Great, Mr. Smith. Well, I'm super confident that we can help, and I have a few ideas on how we can do this. But first, I want to explain to you why I'm so confident. And so this part right here is so important, because every single person that they'll ever talk to about their pain is going to say like, oh yeah, we can totally help with that. But very, very few ever tell them why. And so I love to tee up my stories by using this, because it tells them that you're not only confident, but you can back it up. Super confident we can help, and I have a few ideas around this, but first I want you to understand why I'm so confident. You know how you were telling me that that you went to a bunch of chiros, you went to a few PTs before, but they pretty much just handed you off to a tech or an aide, and you really just did basic exercises that you felt like you could do from home, and it kind of made you just feel like you were another number in the clinic. They didn't really care. Well, that reminds me a lot of a different situation with one of our recent clients, Mike. See, he also had a lot of shoulder pain. He was also a CrossFitter, and he was struggling with doing his overhead lifts, and he couldn't bench the way that he used to. And so we brought him in, we put him in, I did 60-minute, hour-long sessions just entirely with the physical therapist, never handing him off to an aide, so we could really tailor that experience for him. And we took him through our 3-phase process. Okay, part 1, we got him out of that pain right away. Once he was out of pain, we addressed what the root cause of that pain was. And so once we addressed that root pain, we wanted to make sure that that pain never actually came back. So phase 3 was focusing all on strengthening and performance. And so not only did we make sure that that pain didn't come back and he got a long-term solution, but we also taught him how to make sure that other future injuries never even happened. And so now not only is he not out of pain, but he's added 35 pounds to his max, and he's actually feeling and doing better and competing better than he ever did before he came to see us. Now, Mr. Smith, does that sound like the process that could work for you? And they're going to say, yes, that sounds amazing, because that's what they think you want them to say. But don't end there, because they are just saying what you want them to say. It is very important to challenge them. This is one of my favorite things to do on the call. Once they say, yeah, that sounds great, ask them, well, why? And make them tell you and explain to you why the process that you just laid out for them is going to work for them. And now all of a sudden they're convincing you and convincing themselves why working with you is in their own best interest. And so once you break that whole piece down, they believe that working with you is the best option. Now it's time to go into actually getting them scheduled. And so I like to do what's called an assumed close here. We don't ask, okay, great, well, would you like to get scheduled? Instead, we say, perfect, Mr. Smith. I got an opening next week, Wednesday and Friday at 3 o'clock. Which one of those works for you? And so that's called the assumed close, and works very, very well. And once you have them on the schedule, you collected their information, this is when you start going through the specific details of the actual practice. Break down, okay, here's what your first visit is going to look like. Tell them what the rate is actually going to be, and that typically, people like my story of, I think I said Mike, the Mike example story. So typically with these kind of shoulder injuries, we're seeing that it's going to take about 6 to 9 visits to get you to where you want to be and feeling better than you ever have. And then tell them, once you're scheduled, we're going to send over your intake forms, or your evaluation accelerator form, as you might have heard us call them. And then we're going to give you all the information you need about parking, about showing up, as well as super bill information, because obviously we are cash based. But that's because we're able to do things that insurance wouldn't allow us to do to make sure that you have the long-term solution that you need. And so we do offer super bills. Our clients usually are able to send the information to their insurance, usually get about about 50 to 80% reimbursement on the care that we have with us. And so we just break them down in their information. We tell them our rates, tell them what the process is going to look like so they don't feel blindsided when they come into the practice. It's very important at the very end of the call, once you got them scheduled, you cover your rates, you set the expectation that this isn't going to be a one-day fix. If you want the outcome that Mike had, you're going to need about 6 to 9 visits. And tell them that, because you need them thinking about that so that by the time you're done with the evaluation and you're pitching them the package, they've already decided that they want it. So guys, if you guys enjoyed this sales training, make sure you smash that like button, make sure you subscribe, and if you're looking for more sales training, click on this next video where we break down our entire sales script and start learning not just how we do our first call and how our script works, but also how we onboard our clients and how we actually go about selling the packages. So hit the subscribe button and enjoy the rest of the videos.